The scent of antiseptic and fear clung to the air, a familiar perfume in the emergency room. Inside cubicle 3, a 6-year-old boy named Leo whimpered, his arm cradled in a cast, eyes wide with a terror far too profound for a child his age. His mother, pale and shaky, clutched a crumpled tissue. He fell down the stairs, Nurse Rivera. She choked out, the words catching in her throat. It was so fast. Maya Rivera, 26, knelt beside Leo's gurney, bringing her eyes level with his. Her scrubs, a vibrant blue, seemed to hum with the quiet energy she exuded. "Hey there, brave guy," she said, her voice a warm, steadying balm. "That's a pretty impressive cast, isn't it? Looks like you're going to have some awesome stories to tell your friends." She offered a gentle, reassuring smile, and for the first time since he'd arrived, a flicker of something other than fear crossed Leo's face. He even managed a tiny, wobbly smile back. "Now, are you up for a superhero mission?" Maya continued, pulling a set of colorful markers from her pocket. "We need to decorate this cast. What kind of superhero are you? A mighty knight? A super spy? Or maybe a dinosaur tamer?" As Leo's eyes brightened, Maya's hands worked with practiced efficiency. She checked his vitals, adjusted his IV drip with a featherlight touch, and spoke to his mother in low, calming tones, explaining post-discharge care. She moved through the chaos of the ER with a graceful authority, a quiet force amidst the blaring alarms and urgent shouts. To her, every patient, no matter their story or their pain, deserved her full, unwavering presence. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling, etched into her very being since she was a little girl watching her grandmother, a community health worker, tend to their neighbors in their small, close-knit town. Later that night, the city lights blurred outside the window of the bus carrying Maya home. Her small apartment, nestled in a buzzing but slightly run-down neighborhood, was a sanctuary of sorts. Pictures adorned the fridge, her parents beaming on their anniversary, her younger sister graduating college, and a faded snapshot of her grandmother's wise, wrinkled face. On her tiny kitchen table, amidst a stack of medical textbooks, lay a scattering of bills. Student loans, rent, utilities, the constant, gnawing reminder that even a hero had to pay for her cape. Or, in her case, her scrubs. The weight of her debt, a silent, persistent hum beneath the surface of her idealism, was a familiar companion. She kicked off her worn sneakers and massaged her tired feet. The news droned softly from a small television set in the corner. A local reporter was discussing the city council's latest decision, the imminent closure of the Elmwood Public Health Clinic, a vital resource for the city's underserved population. Maya knew Elmwood. She'd seen its former patients flood her ER, sicker, more desperate, after their primary care had been stripped away. The clinic's closure was not just a political maneuver, it was a slow-motion public health crisis. The next morning, the staff room buzzed with the news of an upcoming protest against the clinic's closure. "Can you believe it?" scoffed Brenda, an older, jaded nurse, stirring her coffee with a sigh. "Another Friday, lost to traffic jams and angry shouting. Honestly, why can't people just deal with it?" Maya looked up from her lunch, a simple salad she'd packed herself. "They're shutting down Elmwood, Brenda. That clinic serves thousands of people who can't afford private insurance. We see the fallout here every day." Brenda just waved a dismissive hand. "That's above our pay grade, honey. We're nurses, not politicians." But for Maya, the two were inextricably linked. Her patients' health wasn't just about their individual bodies. It was about the health of the community, the accessibility of care, the very fabric of society. She remembered Mr. Henderson, a diabetic patient who relied on Elmwood for his insulin and regular checkups. Without it, he'd end up in a critical condition in her ER, his health spiraling, his life jeopardized. It was a vicious cycle. An idea sparked in her mind, a quiet but insistent pull. "I saw on a community forum that they're looking for volunteer medics for the protest," she said, more to herself than to Brenda. "Just to handle minor injuries, dehydration, that kind of thing." Brenda snorted. "You're not actually thinking of going, are you? You'll just get caught up in the mess. It's not worth it, Maya. Stay out of it." But Maya couldn't stay out of it. Her conscience, that quiet but unyielding compass, wouldn't let her. She wasn't going to raise a fist in defiance or shout slogans. She was going to do what she always did, provide care, protect people. It wasn't about taking a side. It was about upholding her oath. She finished her salad, a resolve hardening in her chest. This wasn't about politics, not really. This was about people. And where there were people, especially vulnerable ones, Maya Rivera felt an undeniable pull to be there, ready to heal. She would pack a small first aid kit, wear comfortable shoes, and simply be present, a steady hand in the unpredictable currents of human emotion and societal friction. The Elmwood Clinic closure represented a wound in the community, and Maya, with the heart of a healer, couldn't ignore it. She just couldn't. The protest filled City Hall Plaza with a vibrant, restless hum. Hundreds had gathered, a diverse tapestry of ages, races, and backgrounds, all united by a shared sense of injustice. Placards bobbed above the crowd. "Healthcare, not headaches. Save Elmwood. Our health is not your profit." The air, thick with the scent of cheap coffee and righteous indignation, vibrated with chants that rose and fell like waves against the imposing facade of City Hall. Maya, dressed in jeans and a plain blue t-shirt with a red cross taped to the sleeve, moved through the edges of the crowd, a small but well-stocked first aid kit slung over her shoulder. She was stationed near a makeshift medic tent, a canvas awning providing scant shade from the late afternoon Sunday. Her first few hours were exactly as she'd anticipated. A sprained ankle from a misstep off a curb, a young woman feeling faint from dehydration. Maya pressed a bottle of water into her hand, urging her to sit, and a couple of minor cuts from jostling in the crowd. She spoke softly, her hands efficient and gentle, her presence a quiet anchor in the rising tide of emotion. This was her element, providing care, a steady hand. She heard a familiar voice, sharp and slightly cynical, just as she was bandaging a scraped knee. "Looks like you guys have quite the little operation here." Maya looked up to see Ben Carter, the local journalist, his camera slung around his neck, a critical glint in his eye. He was taller than she remembered, with a perpetually rumpled shirt and an air of weary detachment. He'd clearly dismissed the medics as part of the protest's background noise, another prop in the grand theater of public demonstration. "We're here to help, Mr. Carter," Maya replied, her tone polite but firm, not indulging his jaded professionalism. "People get hurt in crowds, regardless of the cause." Ben merely grunted, already raising his camera to snap a wide shot of the escalating crowd. "Just making sure the optics are good for the bleeding hearts, right?" He didn't wait for a response, already turning, his attention caught by a group of particularly vocal protesters near the front of the line. Maya watched him go, a familiar weariness washing over her. She knew his type, the cynical observer, detached, always looking for the angle. She simply returned to her work, to the immediate, tangible needs of the people around her. As the sun dipped lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the plaza, the atmosphere shifted, the chants grew louder, laced with a new urgency. The police line, previously static, began to advance, slowly but inexorably, pushing the protesters back from the City Hall steps. The rhythmic beating of police batons against riot shields created a chilling, percussive rhythm that seemed to tighten the air. Shouts from the officers, amplified by megaphones, boomed over the crowd. "Disperse! Disperse immediately! This is an unlawful assembly!" A tremor of unease rippled through the protest. The good-natured camaraderie began to fray, replaced by a growing tension, a palpable sense of apprehension. Maya felt it too, a prickle on her skin. She scanned the crowd, her professional instincts kicking in. Where were the exits? Who looked vulnerable? Then, chaos. A sudden, piercing wail of sirens, not from the usual police cruisers, but from a specialized unit. The crowd surged backward, a wave of bodies propelled by fear. Maya braced herself, reaching out instinctively to steady a woman who stumbled past her. The shouts intensified, no longer just chants, but screams of alarm. Suddenly, a series of dull thuds echoed through the square, followed by sharp, explosive reports. Tear gas. Rubber bullets. Less lethal crowd control devices designed to disperse, to stun, to inflict pain without, theoretically, killing. The acrid smell of tear gas hit Maya's nostrils, burning, making her eyes water immediately. People were scattering, coughing, choking. Panic became a tangible entity swirling through the plaza. Maya's eyes darted through the swirling haze, searching for anyone in immediate distress. Her gaze snagged on Ben Carter. He was standing dangerously close to the police line, back to the advancing officers, completely absorbed in getting a shot, his camera pressed to his face. He seemed oblivious to the true danger, lost in his journalistic tunnel vision. Then she saw it. A dark, cylindrical object, spewing a thin trail of smoke, arcing through the air. It looked like a gas canister, but it wasn't arcing high. It was coming in low, tumbling end over end, directly, unerringly, toward Ben. It was spinning fast, a dangerous, unpredictable projectile. He hadn't seen it. He was focused, framed, utterly unaware. Maya didn't think. There was no conscious decision, no internal debate. Her body moved before her mind could even process the full scope of the threat. She launched herself forward, a primal scream tearing from her throat, though it was lost in the cacophony. "Get down!" she shrieked, her voice raw. She hit Ben with the force of a battering ram, shoving him hard, sending him stumbling to the ground. As he fell, disoriented and grunting in surprise, Maya didn't hesitate. She threw herself over him, curling her body, covering his head and torso with her own. Her arms instinctively went over her head, tucking her chin, trying to make herself as small and protective as possible. A sickening metallic thud reverberated through her bones, a brutal impact that seemed to shake her entire being. An explosion of white-hot, searing pain bloomed across her back and shoulder, an agony so intense it stole her breath. She heard the distinct, sickening sound of fragmentation, not just a thud, but a tearing, ripping sensation, as if her flesh itself was being shredded. The world tilted violently, colors blurring into an indistinct wash. The smell of burning rubber and her own blood filled her senses, sharp and metallic. Her last conscious thought, clear even through the haze of agony, was a clinical assessment, detached and professional. Multiple deep lacerations, possible shrapnel embedment, suspected rib fracture. Breathing compromised. Then, the edges of her vision tunneled, darkening, shrinking, until there was nothing left but the crushing weight of unconsciousness. Beneath her, Ben lay stunned, winded, his camera abandoned. He blinked, the tear gas stinging his eyes, and looked up. He saw Maya, prone, her body still covering his, a widening crimson stain blossoming rapidly across the back of her blue t-shirt. The acrid smell of blood, warm and metallic, mingled with the tear gas. He saw the shattered fragments of the canister scattered around them, some still smoking. He saw the glazed, unfocused look in her eyes just before they fluttered shut. And in that moment, as the chaos of the protest raged around them, Ben Carter, the cynical journalist, felt a cold, crushing wave of horror, followed by an agonizing, dawning realization. This young nurse, this background scenery, had just saved his life. The first thing Maya registered was the sterile, familiar scent of an IV drip, a stark contrast to the acrid smoke and metallic tang of blood that had been her last memory. Then came the dull throb in her back and shoulder, a persistent, unwelcome companion. She opened her eyes slowly, the fluorescent lights of the ceiling fixture searing into her pupils. She was in a hospital room. Her hospital. The irony was not lost on her, even through the haze of pain medication. "Maya, can you hear me?" The voice belonged to Dr. Lena Hansen, a senior attending physician from the ER, her face etched with a mix of professional concern and personal distress. Maya managed a weak nod. "You're in good hands, doctor," Hansen said gently, her fingers briefly touching Maya's forehead. "You took quite a hit, multiple deep lacerations on your back and left shoulder, some embedded shrapnel we've removed, and a fractured rib. Luckily, no major organ damage, but it was close. You're very lucky, Maya. Lucky." Maya tried to form a smile, but her lips felt stiff, her body a battlefield of aches. She was a patient now, stripped of her professional competence, vulnerable and dependent. The thought was disorienting. Just as the painkillers began to lull her back into a drowsy state, the door creaked open again. Two figures in crisp police uniforms stood in the doorway. Detective Miller, a burly man with a clipped mustache, and Officer Ramirez, younger and with an unreadable expression. They were not there to express concern. "Miss Rivera," Detective Miller began, his voice devoid of warmth, "we need to take your statement regarding the incident at City Hall Plaza yesterday." Maya's gaze flickered to Dr. Hansen, who gave her a subtle, reassuring nod before excusing herself, leaving Maya alone with the officers. The room, which had felt safe moments ago, now hummed with an undercurrent of tension. "So, Miss Rivera," Miller continued, pulling up a chair with a scrape that grated on Maya's nerves, "can you explain why you were interfering with police operations at an unlawful assembly?" Maya blinked, confusion warring with the persistent ache in her body. "Interfering? I was volunteering as a medic. I saw Mr. Carter in danger," I reacted. Officer Ramirez scribbled in a notepad. "And what was your relationship with Mr. Carter? Were you associated with any of the protest groups?" The questions were like tiny, sharp needles, designed to prick and provoke. Maya felt a surge of frustration. I barely know Mr. Carter. I'm a nurse. My affiliation is with patient care. I saw someone about to be seriously injured, potentially killed, by a crowd control device fired by your officers. I acted to prevent that. Miller's eyes narrowed. Our officers were following procedure, Miss Rivera. They deployed less lethal force to disperse a volatile crowd. Your actions could be interpreted as obstructing an officer in the line of duty, potentially inciting further unrest. Inciting unrest? Maya managed a weak, incredulous laugh, which sent a jolt of pain through her fractured rib. I was shielding a man from shrapnel. I took shrapnel myself, trying to save him. Is that what you call obstruction? Ramirez looked up from his notepad, his gaze flat. We're just getting the facts, ma'am. It's unusual for a medical professional to insert themselves so directly into a police engagement. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. She was not a victim, but a participant, culpable in her own injury, perhaps even deserving of it. They didn't see a hero. They saw a liability, an inconvenience, a potential witness against their own. Maya felt a cold dread creep into her gut. This wasn't just about an incident report. This was about framing a narrative. As if on cue, the next morning, the dam broke. Ben Carter's initial article, written in a blur of shock and profound gratitude, had already gone live. Hero Nurse Shield's journalist from Police Shrapnel at Protest, screamed the headline of the local online paper, accompanied by a blurry, slightly grainy cell phone image of Maya's blue-clad back, a blossoming crimson stain stark against the fabric as she lay over Ben. His raw, emotional account of her selfless act, devoid of his usual cynicism, resonated instantly. It went viral locally within hours. By the time Maya was lucid enough to check her phone, the story had exploded. National news outlets picked it up, then international ones. Nurse Hero trended worldwide. Her name was everywhere. She was a symbol, a beacon of courage in a world desperately searching for one. Her phone, which she'd been given back by Dr. Hansen, vibrated relentlessly with messages from friends, family, and strangers alike, all expressing awe, concern, and gratitude. But the triumph of this recognition was short-lived. Later that afternoon, a new visitor arrived. Not a well-wisher, not a friend. Mr. Davies. Harold Davies, the hospital's director of risk management. He was a man sculpted from beige suits and corporate jargon, his smile a thin, practiced line that never reached his cold, calculating eyes. Miss Rivera, he said, his voice smooth and unctuous. So glad to see you recovering. We're all very concerned about your well-being. The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. Maya instinctively tensed. She knew this tone. This wasn't empathy. I'm sure you understand the sensitive nature of this incident, Davies continued, clasping his hands in front of him. Our hospital maintains a strict policy of political neutrality. Our primary mission is patient care, not involvement in public demonstrations. Maya felt a flush of anger. Mr. Davies, I was providing patient care. I was helping people. And I saved a man from serious injury. Davies's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. Understood. However, the media attention, while initially positive, has become rather complicated. We're seeing some negative pushback, accusations of our staff participating in unlawful assembly, associating our institution with a radical agenda. You understand, this could have significant implications for our public image, our funding, even our legal standing. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial murmur, though his words felt like a veiled threat. Now, Miss Rivera, while we commend your initiative, we strongly advise you to refrain from speaking to the media further. Any comments should come directly from the hospital's public relations department. We need to control the narrative, maintain our neutrality, and ensure the hospital's best interests are protected. His implication was clear. Her heroism was now a problem. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a potential liability, a wrench thrown into the carefully calibrated machinery of corporate image. The very institution she had dedicated her life to, the place where she had just been a patient herself, was now actively trying to silence her, to erase the very act that had made her a hero to millions. This was the first bitter taste of rage bait. The audience would see her selfless act, and then see this cold, calculating administrator trying to bury it for the sake of the bottom line. And they would hate him for it. Maya felt a cold, bitter wave of disillusionment wash over her, a heavier pain than any physical injury. She was a hero, yes, but to the powers that be, she was a problem. The police chief, a stern-faced man named Chief Thompson, stood before a phalanx of microphones, his uniform crisp, his expression unyielding. The press conference, held barely 48 hours after Maya's heroic act, was ostensibly to address the City Hall Plaza incident. But Maya, watching from her hospital bed, a cold dread tightening in her chest, knew its real purpose. It was to control the narrative. I want to commend the swift and professional actions of our officers in dispersing what had become an increasingly unlawful and volatile assembly, Chief Thompson stated, his voice booming with artificial authority. He spoke in carefully chosen words, peppered with legal jargon, each phrase a subtle undermining of the truth. Our officers encountered significant resistance and were forced to deploy appropriate, less lethal measures to ensure public safety and restore order. Then came the punch. Regarding the unfortunate injury to Miss Rivera, we deeply regret that any citizen was harmed during the incident. However, Miss Rivera's presence and subsequent actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, placed her directly in harm's way. Our reports indicate she was actively engaged in the protest activities as a self-proclaimed medic, and her injury was, regrettably, a consequence of her decision to remain in an area designated for dispersal. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing the insinuation to solidify. We reiterate that citizens must comply with lawful police orders. Non-compliance, especially in volatile situations, carries inherent risks. Our officers acted within their protocols to manage what had become an escalating threat to public order. Maya stared at the screen, her mouth slightly agape. He hadn't just downplayed her heroism. He had erased it, twisted it, transformed her into a reckless participant, an agitator who had brought her injuries upon herself. The man she had shielded, Ben Carter, was not even mentioned by name, merely referenced as someone she was interfering to protect. It was a masterclass in institutional gaslighting, designed to sow doubt and shift blame. A wave of nausea, more potent than any painkiller, washed over her. The next day, a certified letter arrived at her apartment, forwarded from her hospital. It was from her health insurance provider. The envelope felt heavy, ominous. With trembling fingers, Maya tore it open. The language was dense, legalistic, but the core message was chillingly clear: denial of claim. Her medical bills, now totaling over 80, zero for her surgery, hospitalization, and follow-up care, were not covered. The reason, highlighted in bold print, sent a cold shock straight through her. Injuries sustained while participating in a riot, civil disobedience, unlawful assembly. A clause, buried deep within the convoluted policy language, designed to absolve them of responsibility in precisely such a scenario. Maya reread it, then reread it again, her mind struggling to process the injustice. This wasn't just an administrative error, it was a devastating financial blow, a cruel punishment for an act of heroism. $80,000. It was more than her annual salary, more than her student debt. It was a sum that would cripple her, condemn her to a lifetime of financial struggle. The insurance company, another faceless institution, was effectively bankrupting her for doing the right thing. The outrage burned through her, a hot, bitter fire in her gut. She had saved a life, and the cost was her own financial ruin. The following week, still recovering at home, Maya received a call. It was Mr. Davies, his voice as smooth and emotionless as ever. "Miss Rivera," he began without preamble, "I'm calling to inform you of the hospital's decision regarding your employment." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She braced herself. Due to the highly publicized nature of the incident, the ongoing internal investigation, and the negative public relations implications stemming from the police chief's statements, we have no choice but to place you on immediate unpaid administrative leave. Maya gasped, the air catching in her throat. "Unpaid leave? Mr. Davies, I was injured on the scene. I was off duty, yes, but I was still acting as a nurse. I saved someone. Your actions have undeniably created a significant liability for the hospital, Miss Rivera," Davies countered, his voice like ice. "The police report explicitly states your involvement in an unlawful assembly. While we understand the public sentiment, the hospital must protect its interests. This leave is pending the outcome of our investigation, of course. But for now, you are to refrain from coming to the hospital premises, and you are not to represent yourself as an employee of this institution." "So, you're effectively firing me?" Maya's voice trembled. a mixture of disbelief and growing rage. For being a hero? For doing what I'm trained to do? Let's call it an indefinite suspension, miss. Rivera, Davies corrected, his tone chillingly precise. And as part of this, we've also informed your colleagues. We ask that you do not contact them regarding this matter, nor should they contact you through official hospital channels. We need to avoid any perception of impropriety. The line clicked dead before Maya could respond, leaving her alone in the crushing silence of her apartment. Unpaid administrative leave. No contact with her colleagues. The institution she had served with unwavering dedication had not just abandoned her, it had excommunicated her. She was jobless, uninsured, facing insurmountable medical debt, and publicly maligned by the police chief. Her own hospital, the very place she had poured her heart and soul into, had turned its back on her, throwing her to the wolves to protect its precious public image. The betrayal was a physical ache, a searing pain deeper than any shrapnel wound. As if the institutional betrayal wasn't enough, the online world, a place that had initially championed her, now turned into a cesspool of vitriol. The police chief's statements, amplified by cynical pundits and right-wing media, provided fertile ground for a vicious counter-narrative. Anonymous trolls, hiding behind the anonymity of the internet, flocked to her social media accounts. Nurse hero? More like Antifa agitator who got what she deserved. Crisis actor? Probably paid to jump in front of the camera. If she was really a nurse, why was she at a riot? She should be in jail, not lauded. Serves her right for interfering with law enforcement. Good riddance. Oh, her phone, once a source of comfort and validation, became a weapon against her. Messages of support were drowned out by a relentless barrage of hate, threats, and accusations. They picked apart her past posts, twisted her words, scrutinized her ethnicity, her gender, her profession. She was called names she didn't even understand. They questioned her motives, her integrity, her very existence. The world, which had briefly embraced her as a symbol, was now tearing her down, piece by piece, fueled by misinformation and an insatiable hunger for outrage. Maya felt herself shrinking, withdrawing. She spent days curled on her couch, the blinds drawn, her phone silenced, the relentless external noise a torment. The physical pain of her injuries, though slowly subsiding, was nothing compared to the emotional lacerations. She was isolated, financially ruined, and publicly shamed for an act that had sprung from the purest place in her heart. The rage bait was working. The audience, now fully invested in Maya's suffering, would feel the burning injustice of her situation, the profound unfairness of a system that devoured its heroes and rewarded those who crushed them. Her heroism had become a curse, and she was adrift, alone, in its wake. The knock on Maya's apartment door was soft but insistent, a welcome interruption to the oppressive silence that had become her constant companion. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the peephole. After days of isolating herself, the thought of facing another person, another potential source of judgment or pity, felt exhausting. But the knock came again, a little firmer. When she finally peered through the tiny lens, she saw Ben Carter, his usual rumpled shirt now looking slightly more respectable, a determined glint in his eyes. He held a large paper bag that smelled faintly of coffee and pastries. Maya opened the door, a flicker of surprise cutting through her despair. "Maya," Ben said, his voice softer than she remembered, devoid of his usual cynicism. "I figured you needed a friendly face, and probably some decent coffee." He held up the bag. "And maybe a little update." He sat awkwardly on her small sofa, placing the coffee and pastries on the table. "I'm so sorry, Maya, about all of it. What they're doing to you, it's disgusting." He ran a hand through his hair. "I published a follow-up piece, a big one. I didn't just report the facts this time. I pulled no punches. I detailed the police chief's statements, the insurance denial, the hospital suspension, Mr. Davies' little threats, everything. I called it out for what it is, institutional retaliation against a hero." Maya listened, a fragile tendril of hope unfurling in her chest. Ben, the detached observer, had found his outrage. His article, a scorching indictment of the system, had gone viral even faster than her initial story. It had ignited a new wave of public fury, not just against the police, but against the insurance company and the hospital. He had used his platform, not to just observe, but to advocate. "I also started a GoFundMe," Ben confessed, looking a little sheepish. "Just a small one to cover your immediate bills, maybe your rent." It kind of exploded. He pulled out his phone, showing her the screen. The amount displayed was staggering, far beyond what she could have imagined. thousands upon thousands of dollars, donated by ordinary people from all corners of the globe, accompanied by messages of solidarity and support. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt tears sting her eyes, not of pain or despair, but of profound gratitude. The very next day, the second knock on her door brought another unexpected ally. Miss Evans. Her business card simply read, Eleanor Evans, attorney at law, civil rights advocacy. She was a formidable woman, sharp-eyed, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a quiet intensity that spoke volumes. Miss Rivera, Miss Evans began, her voice crisp and articulate. My name is Eleanor Evans. I read Ben Carter's article. My firm would like to represent you, pro bono. What they've done to you, the police, the insurance company, your own hospital, it's an egregious violation of public trust and potentially a case of unlawful retaliation. This isn't just about you. It's about setting a precedent. It's about ensuring no one is punished for doing the right thing. Maya stared at her, overwhelmed. A lawyer, a real, powerful lawyer, offering to fight for her, for free. It felt like a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. I don't know what to say. Say you're ready to fight, Miss Evans replied, a faint, determined smile touching her lips. Because we're going to make them regret this. The legal battle began swiftly. Miss Evans wasted no time, filing lawsuits against the city for police misconduct and against the insurance company for bad faith denial of claim. The hospital, wary of further public backlash, tried to stay out of the direct legal fray, but Miss Evans made sure their role in Maya's suspension was front and center in every media statement she issued. One particularly tense afternoon, Maya found herself in a sterile conference room, facing the city's legal team for a deposition. Two formidable lawyers, Miss Thompson and Mr. Chen, sat across from her, their expressions as unyielding as Chief Thompson's had been at the press conference. Miss Evans sat beside Maya, her presence a silent shield. The city's lawyers were relentless. Miss Rivera, isn't it true you were warned to disperse prior to the incident? Miss Thompson asked, her voice dripping with accusation. I was helping people who were in distress, Maya replied calmly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands beneath the table. My role was to provide medical aid. And did you have specific authorization from the police to be on the scene, providing medical aid at what was clearly becoming a riot? Mr. Chen interjected, leaning forward. I had a first aid kit and a commitment to my oath as a nurse, Maya countered, meeting his gaze. I didn't need police authorization to render aid to someone in danger. They tried to twist her words, to discredit her. They brought up her student debt, subtly implying she was financially desperate and thus susceptible to radical influences. They questioned her decision to go to the protest at all, suggesting it was reckless and irresponsible for a medical professional. They even tried to paint Ben Carter as a provocateur, implying she was somehow complicit in his incitement. Miss Rivera, Miss Thompson pressed, do you believe it was appropriate for a medical professional, representing an esteemed hospital, to place herself in a potentially violent confrontation, thus creating a liability for her employer? Maya paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly at the lawyer. My priority has always been to save lives and alleviate suffering. When a gas canister was fired directly at an unarmed journalist, I didn't see a liability. I saw a human being in imminent danger. I acted to protect him, just as I would any patient in my ER. My employer's liability pales in comparison to a human life. Her quiet dignity, her unwavering commitment to her principles, made the lawyer's aggressive tactics seem petty and bullying. Miss Evans smiled faintly, a silent acknowledgement of Maya's strength. Outside the courtroom, the public support for Maya had swelled into an unstoppable force. The GoFundMe, spearheaded by Ben, had not only covered her medical bills and lost wages, but had grown into a substantial sum, a testament to the collective outrage of ordinary citizens. Hashtags like Justice for Maya and Hero Not Liability dominated social media. Petitions demanding accountability from the police and the hospital garnered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Local news stations, shamed by Ben's reporting and the national attention, ran sympathetic segments on Maya, highlighting her selfless act and the cruel irony of her situation. People organized small, peaceful demonstrations outside City Hall, holding signs that bore Maya's face, demanding that she be reinstated, that her medical bills be covered, that justice be done. This outpouring of support from the grassroots, from the ordinary people she had always sought to serve, was a powerful antidote to the institutional venom. It showed Maya that while the systems might be corrupt and callous, the human heart, capable of empathy and solidarity, was still strong. She was no longer just a victim, she was a symbol of resistance, an embodiment of the everyday hero who stood up against the crushing weight of indifference and injustice. And with Miss Evans by her side, and the voice of the people behind her, Maya Rivera was ready to fight. The relentless public pressure, amplified by Miss Evans's strategic legal maneuvers and Ben Carter's unwavering journalistic advocacy, finally began to crack the hardened shells of the institutions. The city, facing a deluge of negative publicity and the very real threat of a costly civil rights lawsuit, initiated a settlement offer. It was far from an admission of wrongdoing, couched in legalistic language of without prejudice and avoidance of protracted litigation, but it was a victory nonetheless. The insurance company, caught in the crosshairs of a public relations nightmare, re-evaluated its initial denial. Citing new information regarding the circumstances of injury, they reversed their decision, agreeing to cover all of Maya's medical expenses. Then came the call from Mr. Davies. His voice, usually so clipped and controlled, now carried a forced cordiality. Miss Rivera, we have concluded our internal review. While we stand by our initial assessment regarding policy adherence, in light of recent developments, we are prepared to offer you reinstatement to your position, effective immediately. We would, of course, also offer a modest settlement for your lost wages and inconvenience. This would be contingent on a standard non-disclosure agreement, ensuring discretion on both sides moving forward. Miss Evans had already prepped Maya for this. She knew the hospital was trying to contain the damage, to buy her silence, and make the whole inconvenient episode disappear. She had fought tooth and nail for this moment, for the recognition that her actions were not just justified, but heroic. But as she listened to Mr. Davies's oily offer, a profound sense of clarity washed over her. She looked down at her hands, no longer trembling. The scar tissue on her shoulder was still sensitive, a physical reminder of what she had endured, a testament to her courage. But it was also a reminder of the betrayal, the chilling indifference of the system she had once believed in so fiercely. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," Maya said, her voice steady, stronger than it had been in months. "But I respectfully decline your offer." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Miss Rivera? Are you quite sure? This is a very generous offer, and your position?" "I am sure," Maya interrupted gently but firmly. "I cannot return to an institution that so readily sacrifices its own for the sake of its image. My values, my oath, do not align with that." She hung up the phone, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifting from her shoulders. It wasn't about restoring her old life. It was about building a new one forged in the crucible of her experience. With the settlement money from the city and the vast surplus from the GoFundMe, Maya didn't disappear. Instead, she channeled her pain, her passion, and her newfound platform into action. Months later, a new organization emerged from the ashes of her ordeal, the Healer's Shield Initiative. Its mission was clear: to provide free first aid, medical support, and legal advocacy for individuals injured while exercising their rights to peaceful assembly and protest. It was a network of volunteer nurses, doctors, and lawyers, all inspired by Maya's story. One crisp autumn morning, Maya, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, stood before a group of eager volunteers in a brightly lit community center. The subtle, still tender scar on her shoulder was visible, a quiet testament to her past, a silent beacon for her future. She held a first aid manual, but her words were from the heart. "You're here because you believe in protecting people," she told them, her voice resonating with a quiet authority. "You're here because you understand that sometimes standing up for what's right comes at a cost. But it also comes with immense power. The power to heal, the power to bear witness, the power to make a difference." She looked at their expectant faces, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a leader, a changemaker, her personal tragedy transformed into a public good. Her story, once a tale of unjust suffering, had become a blueprint for a different kind of victory, not a return to the old, but a determined stride toward a more just and compassionate future.